From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
First of all, the drones cost an enormous amount of money. It's $3 million for each of these warrior alphas. Then there's all the time involved. And the very fact at the end of the day that their data, their sort of electronic intelligence is very poor.
More than 175 children have been killed by drone strikes in Pakistan. We'll speak with journalist Prothap Chatterjee about his encounter with a 16-year-old boy. 3 days after he met with him in Islamabad, the boy went home and was killed in a drone strike. Then, roughly 10,000 people encircled the White House Sunday protesting the Keystone XL pipeline that would bring tar sands oil from Canada to the Gulf Coast.
And everybody's finally just saying enough. Corporations don't get to run everything all the time. When we get to things that are as important as this, we just can't let it happen. Sorry, you know? And that's, I think it's sort of the breaking point for a lot of folks.
We'll speak with 360.org founder Bill McKibben. And on Friday, the Israeli military boarded the Freedom Waves flotilla headed to Gaza and detained all occupants on board. They have since released some, but among those still detained is Democracy Now! Correspondent Jihan Hafez. We'll speak with one of the other reporters. She was deported to Egypt. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Greek Prime Minister George Papandreou has sealed a deal with the opposition on forming a national unity government to approve a $180 billion international bailout. Under the deal, Papandreou will stand down when the new government takes over. Papandreou narrowly won a confidence vote on Friday, but had been under continuing pressure to resign amidst chaos over the Greek debt crisis. He announced the formation of a crisis government Friday.
The steps we have before us are clear. We must assure our partners that Greece immediately, without any delay, does everything that is needed to implement the October 26th agreement. Second, we announced the parties together that the agreement would be supported with wider political support and through a concentrated effort for the creation of a national unity government.
Political analysts warn the debt crisis in Greece could spread to Italy and other European countries. George Pagolatos is a professor at Athens University.
Time is of the utmost importance because the Eurozone is operating not on political time anymore, but on a time that corresponds to the speed with which the markets operate. And there's an ongoing debt crisis in Italy. And the Greek problem has to be cast aside and ring-fenced so that it does not contaminate the ability of the Eurozone to deal with the rest of the problems that are of a much more serious nature.
Israeli President Shimon Peres warned Sunday an Israeli attack on Iran is becoming increasingly likely. Peres's comments come just days before a highly anticipated report by the International Atomic Energy Agency on Iran's nuclear program. According to the Washington Post, the report will claim Iran has mastered the critical steps needed to build a nuclear weapon. The IAEA report is also expected to state that Iran has received crucial technical assistance from foreign weapons scientists from Russia, Pakistan, and North Korea. Meanwhile, the Israeli newspaper Haaretz reports U.S. officials are increasingly concerned that Israel will not warn them before taking military action against Iran's alleged nuclear facilities. One official said the U.S. is absolutely concerned that Israel is preparing an attack on Iran's nuclear facilities. In other news from the region, Israeli forces intercepted 2 Gaza-bound boats in international waters Friday to prevent the boats from breaking the blockade on Gaza. The boats made up the Freedom Waves to Gaza flotilla. One was Canadian, the other Irish. Israel detained the 27 activists on board, as well as all the journalists, including Democracy Now! Correspondent Jihan Hafez. Many of the journalists and passengers have been released, but Jihan remains in detention. Israel defended its decision to intercept the boats in international waters.
A while ago, the Israeli Navy boarded the 2 vessels which were on their way to break the maritime security blockade, which was imposed by Israel on the Gaza Strip. We are talking about a very clear case of provocation, and we maintain our right to defend our borders.
The nation's official unemployment rate fell slightly to 9% in October, but government figures show just 80,000 jobs were added in the month. According to economist Dean Baker, at the current pace, it will take more than 33 years to return to the pre-recession rates of unemployment. Meanwhile, unemployment checks have now run out for the majority of Americans out of work, a shift that points to a growing crisis of long-term unemployment. Early last year, 75% of unemployed workers received unemployment checks. Now the figure is just 48%. A new analysis of census data shows the wealth gap between younger and older Americans has rapidly increased in recent years. The typical U.S. household headed by a person aged 65 or older has a net worth 47 times greater than a household headed by someone under 35. The wealth gap is now more than double what it was in 2005 and nearly 5 times the disparity a quarter-century ago after adjusting for inflation. The median net worth for younger-age households is now just $3,600, down by 68% from a quarter-century ago. The Occupy Wall Street encampment and protest movement has entered its 8th week. Here in New York, protesters will be hosting their first spokes council meeting today, a development in the decision-making process for the movement. Meanwhile, police continue to crack down on Occupy protesters across the country. In Florida, 13 people were arrested Sunday while attending a First Amendment teach-in in Orlando. At least 24 people have been arrested over the last 2 days in Atlanta, Georgia, including 5 people early this morning. In California, police arrested 11 protesters in Riverside while breaking up the protest encampment. Meanwhile, protests were held across the country Saturday to mark Bank Transfer Day, a campaign to move accounts from big banks into community banks or credit unions. Former Secretary of Labor Robert Reich spoke at Occupy Los Angeles after the Bank Transfer Day march.
Because of Occupy LA and the Occupy movement around America, this country is beginning to discuss an issue and a set of issues it has avoided discussing for years, and that is the increasing concentration of income and wealth and political power at the very top of this country, and what that has done to the economy and what that has done to our democracy.
In other news from California, Guardian newspaper has revealed a second Iraq War veteran involved in the Occupy Oakland protest has suffered serious injuries after being beaten by the police. Kayvan Sabehi, who served in Iraq and Afghanistan, is in intensive care with a lacerated spleen. He says he was beaten by police close to the Occupy Oakland camp on the same day another Iraq War veteran protester, Scott Olson, suffered a fractured skull after being shot in the head by a police projectile. The New York Times has revealed the United States has been secretly deploying commando squads to battle drug cartels across Latin America and the Caribbean in recent years. The commando unit has reportedly been used in Haiti, Honduras, the Dominican Republic, Guatemala, and Belize. The Drug Enforcement Administration program began under President George W. Bush and has continued under the Obama administration. In defiance of a peace plan agreed to last week, Syrian forces continued to attack Homs and other cities. Pro-democracy activists say at least 23 people died Sunday, including at least 16 in and around Homs. The United Nations estimated more than 3,000 people have died since protests began 7 months ago. On Sunday, Syrian activists gathered outside the Syrian embassy in Amman, Jordan.
What a state we are in at this time of Eid. This year's Eid comes amid destruction, killing, and displacement. We are here near the Syrian embassy to say to this criminal regime that they have lost legitimacy and they must go.
In news from Africa, an Islamist militant organization is being blamed for a series of attacks Friday that killed as many as 150 people. The United States warned that the group Boko Haram may strike hotels and other targets in the capital of Nigeria, Abuja, during the Muslim holiday of Eid al-Adha. The Colombian military has killed Alfonso Cano, the commander of the Colombian rebel group FARC. Cano died Friday in southwest Colombia. He was shot 3 times following an aerial bombardment of a FARC encampment. Cano had led the FARC since 2008. In other news from Latin America, Nicaraguan President Daniel Ortega appears headed for a landslide re-election victory. Early results show the Sandinista leader received over 60% of the vote. Since taking office in 2007, Ortega has vastly expanded Nicaragua's anti-poverty programs and has boosted spending on health and education programs. Meanwhile, in Guatemala, former military General Otto Pettis won Sunday's presidential election, making him the first former military official to win the presidency in Guatemala since the end of the military dictatorships in 1986. Pettis has vowed to deploy troops on the streets and increase the size of the police force in an effort to fight crime and drug cartels. Human rights groups have accused Pettis of being directly involved in the systematic use of torture and acts of genocide in Guatemala in the 1980s. In Thailand, the death toll from the country's worst flooding in half a century has topped 500. Floodwaters now threatening Bangkok's subway system. Evacuations have been ordered in 11 of Bangkok's 50 districts. Some of Bangkok's outer neighborhoods are completely submerged. Major General Peter Fuller, a top U.S. commander in Afghanistan, has been relieved of his duties after comments he made to Politico disparaging Afghan President Hamid Karzai. Fuller called the leaders of the Afghan government isolated from reality. He also slammed Karzai's recent remark that Afghanistan would side with Pakistan in a war against the U.S. Fuller said, quote, "Why don't you just poke me in the eye with a needle? You've got to be kidding me. I'm sorry. We just gave you $11.6 billion, and now you're telling me I don't really care?" Fuller repeatedly said the Afghan leaders don't appreciate the sacrifice that the United States was making in blood and treasure for the sake of their country. Over 10,000 protesters surrounded the White House Sunday, calling on President Obama to reject the proposed Keystone tar sands oil pipeline from Canada to the Gulf Coast. The protest came exactly a year before the 2012 election. Protesters included Carol Fisher.
I'm here because I had to be, on behalf of my grandchildren, to be able to say, in the face of the rising tide of environmental degradation, political paralysis, and the influence of corporations in our entire systems, that there were people that are saying no. There were people that are saying enough, and that we are, with our focus is on the future and on the health of our planet, of our children, of our democratic systems.
We'll have more on that story later in the broadcast. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Juan Gonzalez. Welcome to all of our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world.